Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another session of the Writing Brave Summit. I have with me today Danielle Anderson, and we are going to talk all about crafting your memoir structure. So I'm really excited. So Danielle is a memoir coach and editor who runs her business and life with heart. Love that. She is the founder of Inkworthy Books, an editorial and publication services company where they believe everyone has a story worth telling, and every story has the power to change the world. Outside of business, words continue to color her life through music, books, movies, art, and writing. And Danielle thrives on staying active. You can find her making magic with her partner and 4 kids, traveling, kickboxing, lifting heavy in the gym, exploring the parks and river valley near her home, or taking cat naps with her very feline friend, Layla. So Danielle, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me, Brooke.
I'm so excited to dive in and talk about all things memoir structure. So I would love to start off with how you work with your clients, because I know memoir structure is like your thing. So when you're working with clients on structuring their memoir, do you give examples of like, these are how some memoirs are structured, or do you kind of start with their story beats and help them craft a structure kind of from the inside of their own story? Tell us a little bit about how you work with folks on this.
Yeah, such a good question. And I hear this from a few different angles, but the answer typically boils down to them, their story, their mission, why they want to get this out, and who they want to tell this to. So I typically will take all of my clients through a structuring, for lack of a better word, workbook, a series of questions, a series of exercises that we work through at their speed. We sometimes take little detours and do different activities. We sometimes do a little market research and find some examples that really help them identify the things that are in their head. Because sometimes you see it, you feel it, you just don't know how to put it into words and how to put it into shape. We will talk about different common shapes for memoirs. You know, there's the E structure that brings us from the middle of the story back around. There's the hero's journey. There's so many different structures that could be applied to a specific story depending on the timeline. So there are so many details that we need to identify before we can play around with that. So I typically will help my clients gather their building materials. That's kind of how I look at it.
Nice.
And so we identify key things. Who are you trying to write to? What is this book about? They're big things. And sometimes the questions sound so simple, but it will take us quite a while to identify, because you want your story to stand out. You want your story to be unique and special. And these are the details that will really help. Even if your story feels similar to other books, these are the details that really make them stand out in the market. And so we spend a lot of time here.
Yes, I love this. Can you talk a little bit more about like some example shapes of books? So you mentioned the hero's journey. That's a big one. Can you talk a little bit more about the E structure, and then maybe like a couple more examples just so people get like their wheels turning a bit?
Yeah, so there are many out there. The hero's journey is something that you may or may not have heard. And it really is something I think a lot more fiction writers are more familiar with, because you can shape a story around that journey. Memoir doesn't always follow it beautifully, but I do love to explore it a little bit, you know, where we're called into action, we go into action, then there's the action, there's kind of the big moment of conflict or challenge that we have to deal with, and then we emerge as a hero and we come back to like normal life, right? So sometimes your story may really follow that beautifully, sometimes it doesn't. And my motto is we don't force, okay? We allow,
Yes,
we explore, we don't force. So the E structure is something that I think typically works really well with memoir, and it kind of helps think of a lowercase e, you loop around. So if you straighten out the E, it's one line, and you're kind of looking at it like your timeline. And if your story, let's say, spans 10 years, you might start in the middle where there's this huge thing that happens and you're like, oh my gosh, if it weren't for this, you know, the rest of the story wouldn't even exist. But I also got to fill them in on this stuff, right? So you kind of start in the middle as the hook. Or you know, it doesn't even have to be exact middle, right? Go with me here, somewhere in the middle of your timeline. And then you loop us back and fill us in. How did I get here? That type of vibe. And then you go forward where the point meets on the E, where you're starting your loop. You go forward and you bring us to the end. So that's the concept behind the E. So in that middle where it touches, you'll want to make a very strong connection. And if you're taking us back to the end, something that happens at the end, we're going to have to figure out whether that works with the E or whether you're looking at something a little bit different, because we don't want it to feel so stale by the time they get to it. So those are some things to keep in mind with the E. There's another shape called the O, the letter O. And this one is so fun. It's not one that works a lot, but it essentially is like, you identify a desire, you try, you go around and you try to get the thing you want and you fail. Well, you're going to try again, right? And so you're kind of doing this cycle through like different phases of trying to get the same thing.
Yeah.
And so we're like rooting for you, and then, okay, that one didn't work. Cool. Let's go back to the drawing board. We're rooting for you, so they call that the O, which I think is so fun. And then there's one, I believe that it's just referred to as like the M structure, where you go up, there's rising action, a conflict, falling action, so there's a couple different peaks. And so I like to have my clients, in order to identify a structure that works well, we typically will just start by listing all of our major scenes. Tell me the things, right? Tell me the things that have happened. And then we can kind of talk about the minor scenes that will fall in between there and see what's going on there. Sometimes they don't identify the minor scenes as major as they need to be identified. So I like to see what I'm working with here. And so we just start by kind of writing bullet point outlines, if you will, or a description of each of the major and minor scenes. And then on top of the what happened, it's like what happened inside of you, right? So I have my clients visualize railroad tracks.
Nice.
One is external, one is internal. If we don't have both, we don't have a story. So you can tell me about all the things that happened, and those are usually the most identifiable for people. It's easy to talk about. Those are the ones where you see a lot of the action, but the thing inside, this inner journey, the transformation that you go on, is equally or arguably more important to nail, because that might be where the biggest change happens, and you're not going to see that in all of the movement of the scenes. So we really need to look at both in order to identify which structure shape will work best for your story.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I love all of this so much. And I love this image of the railroad tracks, like the external and the internal. That is so helpful. And I was listening because so in the summit, y'all, we have, as you know, we have some fiction crafts lessons and some nonfiction craft lessons, but I'll just say that Savannah Gilbo, who's teaching on fiction and how to write an unputdownable first chapter, she has a whole podcast episode about interiority. And she's talking specifically about novels, but it works just as well for memoirs. And she's talking about how books are really the only medium in which we really get inside someone's head, right? Like even when you're watching a movie, like you're still only seeing like what people are showing like on the outside of their bodies, right? But books are the only place where we really get to see like, what are people thinking? What are they feeling? And that's right, what's so interesting. And she was saying newer writers tend, like you were saying, to write more about the external event of what happened, right? But if you don't have, right, like you said, that train track of the internal, what's happening inside, right, there's no story. So I love that image so much because it really shows you like you got to lay down both sides of the track in order for the train to go.
And when I work with clients doing an outlining exercise, I require them to identify both pieces.
Yeah.
Like if this scene is so important, tell me why. Tell me what happened inside that makes it important.
Yes. Yeah. And I think something else that I've been pushing some of my clients to work on is sort of like when they're writing scenes, right, that we get to be able to like kind of be in the room, like, so hear the dialogue, see what space they're in, whatever, see people's gestures, but also like, it's always more interesting to then hear what's going on inside the character's head, right? Like, and I was pushing someone recently, specifically, I'm like, it's even more interesting when like someone says something, but they're thinking something else, right? Because we all do that. And it's like, I don't know, I feel like it really brings characters to life when you get to see like not only what they're doing and what they're saying, but like what's going on inside. So yeah, I love it. Yeah.
Or trying to identify and figure out how to describe this like calm beneath the storm or storm beneath the calm. You're like freaking out inside, but on the outside, you're like, no, it's no problem. And you're trying to keep a straight face. So yeah, I agree. That inner world is so important.
It's so good. All right. So talk to me about like, so I have a lot of intuitive writers in my community, and these are folks who often will write first and then maybe structure later. And I will even say for myself, like, in my novels, I write a draft first and it's very like meandering and I'm like, where is this going? But then before I start the second draft, I structure the whole thing, right? So, so both ways work. I would say structuring beforehand, in my opinion, is more efficient. And also like my brain doesn't work that way. I can't structure until I already know like what's going to happen in the story. And I have to discover it like as I go along.
Yes.
So could you talk a little bit about structuring before versus structuring like after you already have a draft?
Yeah, yes. I love this question. I talk to people about this all the time because there really is two ways around the same mountain. That's how I refer to it.
Love
Like
it.
there's no wrong way to do this. And I don't want to encourage anyone to think that there's one right way and they should be doing it another. There's no shoulds here. This is a creative space. And my biggest piece of advice that I've been incorporating into my work a little bit more recently is know thyself. You understand yourself, Brooke, because you've been writing, but I work with a lot of first-time writers who are like, I have a story, but like, how the heck do I do this? And I get a lot of them mid-process, or they get to the end of 200,000 word draft.
Oh my God.
Like, this has literally happened to me. I've quoted a 300,000 word developmental edit, and I'm like, I really don't want to charge you this, but this is what it's going to cost me to review this thing. And in that place, what they really need is the structuring, because there's no way all 300,000 words belong, right? So there's no.
And just for, like, for people who don't know, how many words would you recommend in a memoir, like ballpark?
Yeah, great question. And I actually just got feedback from the publishing world, the traditional publishing world on this. I have a client who wrote a beautiful memoir and she's getting feedback that it's too wordy. And they are telling her that most traditional publishers will want to see it more towards 80,000. So if you're self-publishing, I would try to follow that rule. 80 to 100 is what readers are going to have an appetite for in a memoir. Similar probably to a novel, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I would say novels are about the same. And I would say I've heard like for self-help style books, it's closer to 60,000 words is what
40 to 60, I would say. Personal development, self-help, more standard nonfiction, even a narrative nonfiction, probably more 40 to 60. People kind of want to get in and out of those books. They want the goods, right? My certification is in nonfiction, so I tend to live there a lot, but I love memoir. That's where my heart wants me to work. But I would say 80 is a good, give or take, is a good place to land. So
going back, like 300,000 words is not a book that is, you don't publish with 300,000.
But if you cathartically need to get it out, please do, right? So know thyself. And so I have been asking my clients to really do kind of a self-exploration. What's your human design? What's your astrology sign? What are these parts of you that are who you are who you're made of? For example, I'm a manifesting generator. I'm going to get a little geeky on you because this is my current geek. That means I have both the energy to manifest ideas and bring this creative space in, but I also have to do. So I'm a really great multitasker, and I can't just sit there and do the thing and focus and like, I need to move and be a little bit more active in that space.
So tell me, so I'm a generator. So what does that mean for me as a writer?
You have the motor. So what you need is probably to be free to like, just get it out, right? And so you're doing it the way that you're designed to do it. And when you say more effectively, that's just a subjective term,
that's true.
Right? It's just a subjective term, like what's right for Brooke. And I have clients who come up at me and they're like, oh my gosh, girl, I can't stop editing. I need to figure out how to write forward, but I keep editing this one chapter. And I'm like, cool, here's what we're going to do. First, we kind of by that point, I probably know their tendencies and how they work best. But, it's like, okay, open up a new document and write me chapter 4. And I want you to put chapters 1 through 3 somewhere completely different. So you're not even seeing them when you open up chapter 4, right? So there's those conversations. And so if you're working one-on-one with me, that's what you get with me. But if you're supporting yourself, understand what works best for you, because there is no wrong way to do this. So yes, on the surface, we'll tell people it is probably more efficient and effective to structure up front, because then you're just writing with a plan.
Totally.
And if you really truly are like, yes, I want to get this published, I do have a goal. It's not just more of a passion project of like, I just want to write. Then you probably want a plan, and it's going to feel better. Like you're going to, maybe not better, but you're going to feel more accomplished when you're like, sweet, I'm like checking off my list and I kind of feel like I'm making progress based on this. You can go back to your structure and and use that as a guide. But for people who are like, I got to get this out of me, especially a memoir, it can be so healing to write, so cathartic. And sometimes that's just the way. What I do when I get a client who says like, I got pages and pages, I literally have them start exactly where I start someone who doesn't have anything written. We start with those foundational exercises, those questions that really help illuminate the direction they need to go. And I encourage them to put their manuscript kind of off to the side. Like, imagine it just hanging out at the table. It's there. We're not throwing it in the burning dumpster fire. Like, this is not garbage. It's building material. You're going to go back and create this beautiful blueprint and tell me what this beautiful story, this book looks like, how you want it to live in the world, who you want it to reach, what is it going to do? And then we use your building material and plug and play, put it where it needs to go, weave it together beautifully with transitions and different pieces and play with the structure and all that, or the shape. So it's essentially the same process, except we now have stuff to play with. That's kind of the two different ways. And so know thyself. I am someone who needs a plan. Otherwise, I'm just going to dilly dally, and I'm not feeling like there's a reason for me to write forward. If I don't see the end game, I'm not going to do it.
Yes.
And for you, it sounds like you're more of a just let it out.
Yeah, gotta let it out, because I don't know. I kind of discover what I'm writing about as I go. Like, I have questions, or right, like, but I need to kind of explore and like get in there. And then at the end, I'm like, oh, now I know what it's about. And then right, I can kind of structure it for maximum, hopefully maximum effectiveness, or, drama.
Yeah. And that might be something a little different for if you're writing a novel versus a memoir, because a memoir has like set facts. Like,
yes, it
we
does.
can't really change our story. Some things don't belong, but we can't really change the stuff, right? So sometimes you got to get it out and pick and choose what belongs, but it's typically not as wild of an exploration, I would say. A little bit more contained.
Yeah. So I have a question about like, as folks are kind of, like you said, reflecting on these questions, doing these exercises, thinking through, like, again, what's the timeline? Like, what do I want to say? Right? Like, what shape might be a good fit? Like, are you having folks then like plan chapter by chapter, like where they're going? Tell us a little bit about like, when folks are done, like what is kind of an outline or something look like for one of your clients, perhaps, like as an example?
Yeah. So great question. So we kind of do these preliminary foundational, exercises. We go back and forth. We really hone the things. There are certain elements that I have them use as what I call like guideposts.
Can tell us a little bit about just like one or two of those.
Yeah. So your readers, if you don't know who your readers are very specifically, you're not going to write to the right people, right? You're not using the right voice and the right words. So you need to understand, I call these kind of my sticky note points, where I will literally have them grab a sticky note and write like a little bullet point list and stick it on their screen. This is what my book is about. So theme, identifying your theme in one word or one sentence. I have my clients envision a theme kind of in the shape of an argument. So my book argues that you can overcome an eating disorder. It could be something similar. There is light in the darkness of grief, that type of thing. So it sounds cliche. It can be very vague for lack of a better way to describe it, but it is the guidepost that we use to make sure that all of the scenes that they've selected are relevant. Okay. If you're trying to show me that there's light in the midst of the darkness of healing from grief, then why are we talking about, this over here, your college experience? Where's the light in the darkness, right? Where is that element? So it helps just on a basic scale, keep you on track with what scenes belong and what don't, because that's a huge question in memoir.
Yes.
How do I know what belongs?
Yes.
How do I know what to write about? Where does my timeline start and end? So those are the things, those are a couple of the things, what your readers want from your book. What are they going to trade their time, energy, and money to obtain? What's their desire? And it's a really simple question, but it's really difficult to combine your reader's desire with why you want to write the book. So your reasoning, your reader's reasoning, and then what you want this book to be about, that combines those elements.
Love it.
So once you have your like small list of sticky items,
Mhm.
your guiding lights, your North Stars, then we start with that scene outline where we're writing the major scenes. We are writing, you know, both what happened and the inner journey, so we can kind of see this path, right?
Yep.
And then we identify, you know, we kind of play with shape. We identify like, okay, where is a great point to start this story? Where's maybe that major shifting moment, or that thing without that linchpin moment, your story would not have taken the, you know, the route it did. Like
Yeah.
writing your killer first chapter, you know, in a novel, there has to be a hook, right?
Yes.
So we identify the hook of their kind of looking at their outline.
Mhm.
From there, we can kind of break it down. Each chapter should have kind of one point, right? Like what happened in this chapter? There might be 2 or 3 major scenes that feel related. They may go in a chapter.
Mhm.
For memoir, I tell them not to stress too much about chapters, because sometimes they'll shift as you write.
Yep.
It's very easy to say like, oh, this scene was actually a little bit bigger than I thought, or you know, this actually, I didn't have as much to say about this. And we don't necessarily want them to be exactly the same amount of pages. Each chapter doesn't need some type of structure like that, but
Yep.
it's better to have them feel a bit more evenly spaced.
Yep.
So don't stress too much about that. Until you're writing, you can kind of get in the flow. I really love to end in a place that allows us to feel like something has resolved a bit, or something has shifted a bit, right? There has to be some type of like, I started the chapter here, I ended it here. There's a bit of a resolution there, but also we still are wondering what's going on. We're still questioning things. We're still reading forward. We're very much interested in knowing what happens next.
Yep.
So we will kind of play with structure or chapter structure as we write, but we typically start looking at those major scenes and then the minor scenes that happen in between there to see what that chapter size will look like, just outline. So we end up with kind of a, yeah, I don't know. I don't remember what I'm calling this darn thing. Sometimes I make them up as I go, but it's like the scene outlines broken up into chapters.
Yep.
Like kind of with that shape involved in it.
Yeah, perfect. I love this. Let's talk a little bit before we wrap up about comp titles. So I know we were talking a little bit before we started recording about the importance of researching comp titles, and also like the extreme resistance that almost all of us have to doing this.
Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh. And I support clients going through the traditional path, writing proposals.
Okay. Yeah.
So I definitely
have to have them. Yes.
Have to, but it's so hard. So I can speak from that resistance perspective too, but it's so valuable, because when we're writing the description for a comp title, we're looking at 2 different things. Number one, how does this book differ from mine? But how does this book illuminate mine? I love to imagine my book, your book, as one around a table at a tea party. All these people are at a tea party, right? And they're just like, hey, girl, what's up? Like they're talking like, you know what? Yeah, I love that message. Mine's adding to that, but we all belong at the same table.
Oh my gosh, I love this so much.
Isn't that such a beautiful
idea?
Because you're not in competition. I don't really like that word. You're not in competition with these books. We are all in conversation with these books. And your voice brings something more. Your story brings something more. What is that more? Sometimes you can't see that unless you understand the market. So who's sitting at your tea table? Who are you inviting to your tea party? Girls, we're getting together. We're going to have a chat. Who's invited? And so that's how I look at comp titles. And you really have to understand, we're not bashing these books, right? We're not like, this is where they go wrong. This is what they bring to the table. And this is what I'm adding. There's a gap here, and I'm filling that gap. Otherwise, I'm just another one of 15 books that are saying the same thing. What makes my voice stand out? What makes my voice elevated? And this whole structural process is helping you identify exactly what makes your book unique, sparkly, fresh, something that rises above the crowd, because self-publishing is pretty, you know, crowded at this point. Like there's a lot of people out there talking about some great things. But that doesn't mean there's not room for more books. So please do your research on comp titles. I wish I could recommend all of the best books to go look at, but what you need to do is just get out there and Number one, look at books you love, that you have loved. Look at what you've loved about them. Break them down. Look at it from that kind of those structural pieces of like, if I'm being drawn to this book, why did I want to read it? What was I looking for as a reader? You know, what is that piece that I wanted to take away? As a writer, what do I appreciate about this person's voice, this person's method, this person's structure? Where did they start chapter one? You can even look at table of contents.
I was just going to say that. Yes.
And hopefully most table of contents will give you an idea of how the story breaks down. So even peeking on Amazon's little like peek, you know, sneak peek pages, you don't have to go buy 24 books.
Look inside.
I'm never going to tell you not to go buy 24 books, but you don't need to spend 12 months reading before you figure out where your book lands in the market.
Right. Or, and you can also like, do a little research online, then go to the bookstore, look at a couple books, and then see what else is on the shelf, right? What's on the shelf next to those books? Yeah, I love that.
And even if you're not, I want to emphasize, even if you're not going the traditional route, this is such an important and super valuable exercise for you to do, because it really asks you to take ownership of your voice and your message. Like, where are you landing and what are you trying to bring to the space?
Yeah. I love that so much. All right. Before we wrap up, any like last words of wisdom about memoir structure, anything I didn't ask you about that you're like, we have to know this, any kind of final thoughts?
Oh my gosh. Oh, I could say so many more things, but no, you asked some awesome questions. I would say if you don't know where to start, reach out. There are tons of like, you know, I have tons of resources to help people just learn how to structure kind of basically on their own. Coaches like me, that's what we are trained to do. We are trained to help you structure, but jump in and write, like do whatever feels right for you, but know what feels right for you.
Yes. I love that. So how can people find you, find your resources, hire you, all the things?
Yeah. Okay. Inkwordybooks.com. That's my website. I'm hanging out there. I'm on Facebook. I don't know. I like to lurk a little bit. But I really love to do group events, and I have a free private Facebook group for women writing memoir, which is where I literally have like 200 video lessons in that group. Yeah, for free.
Go get in there.
So find me somewhere. The link is on my website as well.
Okay.
And then that's where you can kind of just start getting a taste of like all the things memoir writing.
Perfect. Danielle, thank you. This was fantastic.
Yeah. You're welcome. Thanks so much for having me. I love talking about it. So anytime you want to chat more, I'm here.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Brooke.